Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you for joining this learning experience brought to you by Datadog. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning. Before we dive into things, I do have just a couple of notes I'd like to review with everyone. First of all, we are recording our session today. So if you miss any of our discussion, if you'd like to watch again later, or if you'd like to share with your team, we'll be sure to send you the on-demand recording via email as soon as it becomes available, shortly after we conclude this live session today. Now, if you'd like to get involved, there are a couple of ways to do so. The first option is to use the chat tab on the right side of your screen. So when you find that chat tab, I'd like you to let us know from where in the world you're joining from today. I'm already seeing a global audience, so thank you all so much for joining in all of your respective time zones. Additionally, if you jump over to that handout section, you'll find there is a resource there for you, so feel free to grab that. If you have any questions, we do want you to direct those questions to that Q&A tab, as we've got a lot of ground to cover today, and we want to keep track of all the questions that come in, so do your best to send those into that Q&A section. And finally, we will be selecting 2 of our most engaged attendees to win a $50 Amazon gift card. So be sure to stick around to send in your chats, your questions, and of course, to fill out our post-webinar survey at the end of the program. All of these will make you eligible for this giveaway. So today we are discussing how to centralize observability for more actionable insights. I'm joined today by Ben Michael, developer advocate at Datadog, and Justin Marks, Senior Enterprise Support Lead at AWS. So Ben and Justin, thank you both so much for joining us today at Techstrong Learning. Ben, would you like to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you, Cody. Appreciate the introductions and welcome. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you here. And we welcome to our discussion and our demo on how to both think about and centralize your observability solution. Thanks for coming. Thanks for putting your where you're from in the chat. Excited to have you here. Just to let you know, our learning objectives today will essentially follow a soup to nuts track, and we hope to assist you with getting the most out of understanding not only how to approach building an effective observability solution for your team, but also how to get started implementing it across your AWS infrastructure today. So let's kick it off. Let me introduce you to the lineup. Reporting to you from AWS is Justin. He's a senior technical account manager and has been working directly with major software vendors for many years, including Datadog. Woohoo! So Justin has been guiding some of our teams to help us engineer, run, and scale Datadog's footprint within the AWS ecosystem. Also coming to you from Datadog is me, Ben Mitchell. I am a developer advocate on our community team, and my focus is typically on helping people understand front-end monitoring and how to get the most out of the tools that are available to them for achieving great end-to-end observability solutions. So let's go ahead and walk through today's agenda. We've just finished our introductions, and we're going to move on into step 2 here in a moment, where Justin will be laying out the groundwork for you to better understand what observability is, its importance as an ongoing development practice, and the benefits of doing it well for your business. After that, I'll be helping you better digest some of these concepts with some demos, and after that, we'll wrap up our time by sharing some resources with how you can get started on this journey yourself, as well as we will try to take a couple of minutes to respond to any questions that you might have. As Cody mentioned, we will also try to respond to those in the chat. And we do have quite a thick agenda today, so if we don't get to meeting any questions at the end, then I will be providing my email and Justin's email. You can definitely reach out to us individually as well. So we'll try to get there. If we don't, please feel free to reach out. Yeah, we're just great to be. We're excited to be here, and thank you came. And with that, I want to hand the screen over to Justin. So Justin, we're excited to hear from you. What do you have for us?
Thanks, Ben. All right. Yeah, welcome everybody. Glad you're here to hang out with us for a little bit while we talk about observability. I'm going to just try to set the stage with some observability concepts, talk about what it is, talk about some best practices, to kind of get you primed and ready for the demos that Ben will be showing you. So if you've ever heard Werner, Amazon CTO, talk, maybe at reInvent or at one of the other summits or something, you'll hear him say two things all the time. Security is job zero, and that everything fails all the time. This is just one of the many reasons that you need observability and we need observability, so that we can tell if our apps aren't working. We can use tracing to get to root causes quickly. Logging can help us dive deeper into problems. Observability can also provide us with information about our business outcomes, our capacity, if we're meeting our service level agreements, performance, right sizing, etc. So let's start with a definition of what observability is. So in 1960, an engineer named R.E. Kalman invented the term observability. It's one of the first times we've seen it in academia. And he had it in the context of control theory, right? We're talking about like manufacturing and engineering. I'm not going to read over the exact definition here, but you can see that I've highlighted some of kind of the key terms that you want to pay attention to, right? Whether or not something's observable, and then a combination of state measurements and outputs. Later, that term was borrowed and adapted to distributed systems and just generally software, right? So at AWS, our definition, again, you can see these alignments here between observability signals, state, and output, but in the context of your architecture. And how do you make sense, of all that telemetry data across all these complex systems that you may run, right? It could be popular web apps, it could be enterprise services, all the different types of data they produce. So to achieve operational excellence and meet your objectives, you're going to need to understand how your systems are performing. And one of the most common questions that we hear a lot, that we get asked is, what's the difference between observability and monitoring? Monitoring is considered kind of like a subset of observability as a space, right? You'll often see monitoring, tracing, and logging described as those three pillars of observability. And there are other tools that help you achieve better observability, such as profilers or AI ops tools to help you look for anomalies and deviations. So observability is a little bit more broad. And let's talk about some of the problems, right? So some common issues that teams face given the infrastructure that they run, the delivery of services, are they collecting the right stuff, right? Are we even collecting the right metrics or logs? Are we collecting too little or too much? How do we make sense of noise, right? How do we eliminate false positives, eliminate false negatives, and really get to like that actionable signal? How do we wrangle tool sprawl around collecting all of these logs and metrics and traces from different systems? How do we architect observability with cost in mind, or how do we architect generally with cost in mind and have observability into our costs, right? That's another problem here. But one that I want to highlight here is, how do we give our teams the self-service context that they need to deliver their services and do their jobs day to day? So I'm going to actually take a quick sidebar on that point. So most teams see observability as an engineering problem, but it's also a business problem, right? You may be listening in, and you may be one of the folks who has any of these stakeholders at the bottom coming and knocking on their door or sending them a Slack message with questions about like, hey, what's going on, right? Somebody who runs logistics may for an e-commerce site may show up and ask like, hey, how many customers are abandoning carts because delivery time was longer than they would have liked? And hopefully you can get them an answer pretty quick, but very commonly, and I've been this person before, I'd have to say, I know we're collecting those metrics and I could probably pull some of this stuff out of logs, but you're going to have to give me some time. I'm going to have to go dig through tools and I'll have to get back to you. Maybe one of your financial stakeholders is in your doorway asking, how much does it cost to run the website? And you go, yeah, I know we have a couple hosted in place A and place B, and this other one has a database behind it, so it might be a little bit more complicated to calculate. I'm going to have to get back to you. Your CISO may be interested in how many attempted attacks have been launched against some of your public endpoints. And you may have to tell them, I have to get back to you on that. You'll see a pattern here. Marketing, loading pages, landing pages, like what are load times? I'll get back to you. Product, hey, how many times are we punching terms into search bars and not getting any results back? And really, it's not a good feeling for these folks to have to wait and to have to rely on like you or your team to help give them that context that they need to do their jobs and to deliver like that business value, right? So back to this slide. Ultimately, what I think when we boil a lot of these questions down for our customers and get to kind of like the core, one of the questions is, how do we build a strategy around this? How do we, kind of build these guardrails so that we can kind of march forth and get observability in place in a way that makes sense for the business. So as far as strategy goes, again, one of the best ways to work through those types of challenges and questions is to build out a strategy that gives your teams direction. And usually you want to start with, what are you going to collect? You want to work backwards from your customers, right? You want to figure out what your customers want, what your stakeholders need, right? What does the CFO need to know? What does the CISO need to know? And then kind of boil that into KPIs, right? Key performance indicators. And once you understand kind of those three pieces of what you need to collect, you got to figure out what you need to observe to calculate and inform those KPIs, those stakeholders, and represent those customers, right? So you work backwards from your customer experience. You figure out what metrics, logs, and traces inform that customer experience and make that customer experience as good as it needs to be. And then you go try to track down those data sources for those things. Where can those metrics come from? Where are those logs living? And how can I get them into like one space so that we can start making sense of it? And then kind of lastly, how do you act, right? How do you want to alert when your KPIs are at risk? How do you alert at various layers when you see things not going so well? How do you evaluate the impact of a problem? And how do you establish root cause and then fix it, right? How do you respond when there's an incident? So I had mentioned the three pillars of observability earlier, right? We have metrics, we have logs, and we have traces. And observability tools today typically can tap into all three of these things. Metrics being, numeric representations of data over time. They're usually good at usually useful for identifying trends, doing modeling, doing prediction, right? Seeing those kind of day-to-day patterns. Your logs are those immutable time-stamped records of events that are really good for digging in and finding unpredictable behavior. And traces being a series of related events that kind of represent that end-to-end flow through your system, right? So, your app stack may start with an API request that hits a DynamoDB table or an RDS database. Maybe there's some other coordination behind the scenes where it touches a bunch of other services, and a trace will help you understand and get visibility into things like latency while your request is traversing that path, right? In AWS, the three main services that provide these pillars that meet these pillars are CloudWatch metrics, CloudWatch logs, and X-ray traces. Cool. So observability best practices. One of them, probably the most important consideration with observability is it's not your servers, it's not your network or your applications. It's what matters to you as a business and what matters to your customers and what your success metrics are. So if you run an e-commerce application, your measure for success may be the number of purchases made over the last hour, right? That might be a meaningful success metric. Regardless of your application, you have to identify those key metrics, right? And work backwards from those key metrics to see what would impact that metric from an app or infra perspective. So if high CPU on your web servers would endanger those customers putting those purchases in, and then in turn your sales, then monitoring that CPU utilization is important. So know your objectives and figure out how to measure them. And as far as being able to correlate these metrics, right, centralizing is kind of a key piece to this. You may have all the data you need today in various places, and they may not be easy to correlate, right? You may have your sales data in a relational database or in a BI system of some type, along with user registrations, but maybe your logs live in another place and your metrics might live in kind of a third data store. And maybe your visit duration times can be extracted from logs, but you don't have it kind of in that format ready to go. So getting all of that together, getting it into a time series, and then being able to correlate your success metrics overlaid with that observability data will make it a lot easier to understand how they like the relationship between them. All right, selecting the right tools. So tool selection is important. It's really going to make a difference on how you operate and how you respond to these problems. So, you want to build a cohesive view of the entire app experience, right? It's one of the worst things is choosing a suboptimal tool for all basic signals, right? This will leave a gap, right? Maybe you're collecting basic logs from a workload, but you're not collecting traces. That leaves you with a gap, and it leaves you with visibility gaps too. All modern approaches to observability depend on being able to connect those dots with traces. A complete picture of your health and operations for your app require tools that collect logs, metrics, and traces, and then performs all that correlation and analysis and anomaly detection, etc. You want to make sure you're using tools with a lot of integrations, right? You don't want to reinvent the wheel. You're going to want a tool that will integrate with your existing identity providers. Let's say you're using Active Directory or some SAML-based IDP. You're going to want a tool that can integrate with that. If you have a ticketing system like Jira or ServiceNow, you're going to want to be able to tie into that inevitably. Maybe your teams use PagerDuty or OpsGenie or another tool out there for paging and escalation. You're going to want to make sure that the tools you pick have those integrations. And finally, computers, they're better at finding patterns than humans, especially at scale, or finding, a deviation from a pattern. So if you have hundreds or thousands or millions of data points to monitor, it'd be nearly impossible to understand what those healthy thresholds are for every single one of them. But many solutions out there have anomaly detection and machine learning capabilities that will kind of do the heavy lifting, that undifferentiated heavy lifting for baselining your data and alerting you when things are not as they usually are. All right, collecting telemetry from all tiers. So your apps don't exist in isolation, right? A lot of folks today, are developing microservices that all talk to each other. Maybe they interact with different layers of network infrastructure, different ISPs, right? If you have, let's say, Android or iOS clients, you have to take into account that they're going to be connecting from Wi-Fi, connecting from 4G or 5G. So, you're going to want to make sure you have a holistic view of the entire workload and make sure that you're focusing on those points of integration between, kind of in each step of your app. And as a rule, each time a component or service calls one another, you're going to want to make sure you're measuring the duration of the request, the duration of the response, and the status. And to create that holistic view, we've been talking about traces a lot. You're going to need that single unique identifier for the entire request chain so that you can trace it through all of the different layers. And having a complete view of your workload means understanding all of those tiers and how your end users experience it. So, your workloads, may interact with an end user, right? Maybe you provide a service that has a website or an API or some sort of app. And using something like real user monitoring will help monitor not just that last mile delivery of their Wi-Fi or their ISP, but actually how they experienced your application. All right. Data is powerful, right? But don't sweat the small stuff. Depending on the size of your app and your architecture, you may have just a ton of components to collect signals from. So kind of at the onset, there's going to be lots of logs. There's going to be lots of metrics and lots of signals there. And while collecting them is important and empowering, make sure you're working backwards from that monitoring what matters point, so that you don't hit that point of diminishing returns, right? Turning debug up on everything will probably run your storage costs up and not get you as many signals as you may need. So just make sure you're kind of balancing that stuff. All right, I think this is my final point. The final best practice is just making sure that observability isn't an afterthought to your dev or your ops folks. The best practice is to put observability early in planning, just like security, which will create a model for people to work with, and then it reduces those opaque corners of your app. Adding tracing now will take time, right? It's not a zero amount of effort. There are tools out there to make things easier, but the effort will return far greater returns if you do it earlier in your dev cycle than if you try to do rework later. And rather than bolting observability into your workload later on, you can use it earlier to accelerate the work. So this could let you, instrumenting logging, metrics, tracing, will allow for your app teams, your dev teams to develop faster. It'll foster good practices, and it'll even help them do rapid problem solving pre-production. Real quick, at the bottom there is a link to most of these best practices fleshed out way longer than we have time for here, and I did link it in the handouts section, so you can check that out there. Cool. So let's say you go through all these best practices and you have everything ironed out. What does it feel like to have observability set up well? So the first one, you and your teams will know pretty certainly that things are or aren't healthy and performant. So when your CISO knocks on your door and asks about how many attacks have we had in the last week, you can open up a dashboard and you can answer that in under a minute. Or you can make a dashboard and hand it to them. They can get the answer kind of on their own in their context. When marketing's curious about that landing page load time, you'll have a marketing-focused dashboard already built for that. And you can just send them the link and they'll be able to get what they need. When something goes wrong, your teams will get alerts and context that they need. Your incident automation kicks off, and maybe that database latency issue that could have cascaded into a big newsworthy 8-hour outage gets turned around in about 20 minutes. You can measure and optimize your architecture in terms of business outcomes. So if one of your product teams wants to provide new functionality to your customers, but you have an executive who wants to understand how changing the API is going to affect sales, you can A/B test that and have your observability solution set up to watch the effects in context of those business outcomes. Maybe you work in a regulated space, or you have to work with auditors, or you have to make SLA promises to your customers. You can provide evidence of compliance to those stakeholders. If you have all of your logs, metrics, and traces in one place and you have an incident, you can tie it into your KPIs, you can show the business impact. It allows you to correlate things very nicely and have things like retrospectives, and allows your teams to move rapidly to improve your customer experience. And having intelligent alerts we'll make sure that the right teams are engaged in a very targeted manner. So now when there's a latency issue for your customers, maybe the network team won't be the first to get blamed unless your dashboard says it's a problem the network team has to fix. So this is what good would look like. This is what great would look like. And partners like Datadog can help you move quicker to get these things deployed in place and get you to that kind of happy state. So I'd be remiss not to mention that Datadog is an AWS advanced technology partner. They have lots and lots and lots of competencies, and really the highlight for me is that they have more than 700 out-of-the-box integrations across many different providers and various integration points, and that includes over 100 AWS service integrations. So that's all I had for setting you all up for the demos. Ben, I'm gonna hand it back off to you. Feel free to take over here.
Oh, there I am. Hello. Thank you, Justin. That was great. I'm really grateful that you could walk through that with us. I am going to kick back off here on the more of the how side of things. I've seen a few questions coming in regarding the centralization of observability, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. So thanks again, Justin, for helping us understand what observability is, why it's a vital component of modern development workflow, and how it directly affects both the cohesion of our teams and the bottom line of our businesses. So that's all really good to know. Now, as we move along from considering what observability is and how it's a vital component of a mature organization's workflow, let's start to focus on the practical application of how you can get your hands dirty with setting up an effective and centralized observability solution that gives you direct and actionable insights from the telemetry data that's being generated by your AWS deployments. So first, before we jump into the demos, let's break down what this concept of centralizing observability actually means. It's no secret that common web app architectures have grown and grown and grown and grown exponentially in complexity year over year. And you may not be provisioning, as many services or resources for your app as Netflix per se, but all the same, your highly available clusters or instances are producing and receiving logs and metrics and traces from a myriad of different services and incoming data sources of varying types. And from various platforms. So as you generate and receive these large volumes of telemetry data, how you effectively process them in such a way that helps you continually understand your app's end-to-end performance is really important. And how do you do that on a given day? Well, a lot of teams start off their observability journey with an approach that's more tightly scoped to their particular team or service or product area when setting out to build a useful observability solution. But this can produce silos of information that other teams should know about, but don't often have access to. And that can take up a significant amount of time and energy when trying to filter, correlate, and maintain multiple streams of telemetry data from different sources so that these important decisions that need to be made about them can be made by more than just one particular team, especially in terms of ongoing performance and UX optimizations for a product. So rather than tightly scoping your observability solution in this way, if you bring all of your telemetry data into a single point of ingestion that can give any of your stakeholders immediate insight into your product's current health, this enables you and your team to pinpoint and understand BI, valuable business insights across your stack that stretches beyond what one team owns. Allows you to get a much deeper understanding of your global infrastructure's health, as well as the viability of the current user experience in every region, if that service is offered as Datadog offers it. It helps you easily filter down and correlate your logs, metrics, and traces into only the vectors that you want to know about or track. By generating averages that are not false positives that you can continually monitor and set alerts for if they go beyond the desired performance threshold that you've set. So to build on what Justin was saying a moment ago, I think one of the first considerations to be made in your journey towards centralizing your observability starts with the question, what kind of telemetry data are you generating right now, and how are you going to be migrating it into one place for continuous analysis? This might be the first time that you've considered building out your observability solution, or you may have some data pooled in a couple of different stores already. And if your context fits the first of those scenarios, integrating with a service like Datadog and installing a reporting agent on your deployments may be your next step. If you're in the second scenario, migrating your data into one central solution like Datadog using a tool like Observability Pipelines may be your next logical move. That is a tool that helps you enrich and filter your existing logs, metrics, and traces by adding contextual data to it so that you can start to contextualize it in order to get at those useful performance and health averages. And it can be from any source coming in and into one central place. So that's pretty great. At the end of the day, though, the most desirable outcome here is that you'd have an ongoing end-to-end view into the health and viability of your app, services, and/or infrastructure at any given moment in time. So generally, that's achieved through the use of application performance monitoring, APM for short. That's facilitating the collection of your trace data, which is then correlated to your logs, and also integrated with a front-end monitoring tool, as Justin mentioned, like Real User Monitoring, also known as RUM, which monitors the live actions of your real users in near time. And that all comes to a head in one place where you can review the performance and health metrics of all those things in an end-to-end view. You can, helps you understand average initial loads for your users from their perspective, how long it took to load an app in each region, and why per session or in aggregate. That kind of stuff is really valuable and useful as you're trying to get people to continue to use your app. So we're going to get a firsthand view into what this looks like in just a moment, but it's very important to note that setting yourself up in this way naturally shows your team how to maintain what's crucial for your app and to be alerted whenever a problem exists rather than having anyone tell you about it. So fortunately, setting it up is easier than it's ever been. Datadog currently maintains over 100 AWS integrations that make centralizing your telemetry data as simple as possible. You can quickly spin up reporting agents and start reviewing what's going on with your deployments in a very short amount of time. But rather than talking about how this is done, why don't I just show you? So let's go ahead and jump into our first demo. Yeah, so to kick things off, we're going to walk you through what it looks like to funnel metrics, logs, and traces from an AWS deployment into Datadog. To do that, I'll briefly be referencing a Learning Lab environment that provisions an example e-commerce app, which is exciting because you can use it after our time together today, but I'm going to use it in order to help you have a hands-on way to try it out, try out configuring an app for reporting and using the AWS integration to start getting this into one place. After that, I'll be using Datadog to review a different e-commerce app that leverages our AWS integrations as well. And the lab that I'll show in the first portion of the demo, just again, is free and it's available for you to try out anytime. If you want to continue on with learning how to do this yourself, please go to this link. And you'll get temporary credentials that will be around for 14 days, I believe. So feel free to jot that down if you'd like to do this yourself. We also have a lot of other courses at learn.datadoghq.com that are available, a lot of free stuff. So it's a great way to learn how to do this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into the demo. So this is the lab that I mentioned, the lab environment that I mentioned just a moment ago. To get you started with this, and as you can see, we have a terminal and an IDE and hooks into the AWS console, so you can use temporary credentials to try out setting up and forwarding logs. and other data. So first, let's just take a general look at how this app is set up in AWS. Now, I don't have as much time as I'd like to be able to show you all of the details. What I can show you right now is that this particular application is configured and set up to be used with CloudFormation. So if I go over here to the IDE, I have a StoreDog, that's our e-commerce app, CloudFormation.yaml file. And you can see that we're using this AWS template, and we have a few resources that we're provisioning here.
Hey, Ben?
Yes.
We can't see your other screen.
You cannot see my other screen. Okay, so it must have been that particular window. You know what I'm going to do? Thank you for telling me that. What I'm going to do is share. So I'm going to stop sharing that for a moment. Hello, it's me again. I'm going to share my screen. Here I go. So instead of that, I'm going to share. Oh, goodness. Okay, window. Okay. Well, I'm going to share this window here. You're going to see me and Justin again, probably many of us. So here we go. And now you should be able to see a lab. Can everybody see the lab?
Looks good.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay, so now you should be seeing a browser window. Apologies for that. What I was referencing earlier is you get provisioned a terminal like this, and then you have an IDE and a link into your AWS console as a part of this lab. And there's also a really great guide that leads you through this whole thing, so you can go through that yourself if you'd like. But what I was here to show you right now is that you have this, this YAML file that configures, that's a configuration that helping this particular application be provisioned within the context of CloudFormation. So we've got that available. You can see the template format version we're using. You can see that we have some resources we're using here. Some of the interesting ones are more like the database, and there is an advertisement service and some other services as well that we provision along with this. So you can definitely scroll through that if you'd like. We have another role that is used for forwarding logs. So this is like another aspect that you would want to dive into that we lead you through here as well. So you have, you can see that we have some configuration for having a log forwarder role here as well. So that there's just some things under the surface here to help us get this initialized. So with your IAM and your ARN roles need to be configured, using CloudFormation in order to get this rolling. But for now, instead of getting more deeper into this, because it's supposed to be 2 minutes, I'm going to move over into showing you about integrations. So let's go over here to Datadog. This is the Datadog application. This is not necessarily the landing page, but where we did land was in the integrations tab. In the lab that I have available for you there at the Learning Labs site, we have a Datadog integration role stack that you can work with in CloudFormation, as well as setting up a Datadog forwarder ARN, which is a log forwarding Lambda function that funnels CloudWatch logs to Datadog. So that's pretty cool. Once you set that up, you'll be able to see your metrics coming through and take a but I'm going to show you what that looks like in a moment. So first, let's take a look at this here. We've got, a whole bunch of integrations. In this particular demo, I'm just going to go ahead and click right on AWS, and it looks like, cool, I have an AWS integration installed. And as you can see, there are some, there's role name, all this information, and that I need to be able to get that moving. It's deployed on a bunch of different regions, or we use a lot of different regions to make it work. We have metric collection from a lot of different services, which is awesome. So, that's coming in from anything that you can probably potentially think of here within the, for all of your IAC choices that you're using. I could go down the list here, but obviously, CloudWatch logs is going to be an important one, as well as any others that you care about. EC2, DynamoDB. So we're collecting a bunch of metrics from these different services. And then we also have log collection set up, and it is configured with a particular ARN, and we get log sources from a few different places as well. So that's pretty handy. But once all this stuff is set up and integrated, then we can move over to metrics. Let's go ahead and take a look at our metrics explorer to see what we have. Now, system.cpu.user is kind of boring. That's not really telling us much. However, if we just type in AWS here, we can start to see a lot of different metrics that we might care about, given our particular stack that we're using. You might care about, your IOPS over the period of the last hour or so, to get a deeper view into that. You might care about your Lambda invocations, maybe. How many times are you firing those things? So let's go ahead and do lambda.invocations. Okay, so we can go ahead and type that in. All right, so yeah, we can start to see how many times these are getting called within the period of time that we'd like to take a look at that. So it's definitely reporting. We've got that in. I mean, if you're using DynamoDB, you can do aws.dynamodb.returned item count and see how many items are coming through. Just whatever you'd like to look at. That's great. So we can analyze. We have a lot to analyze now. So that's awesome. Also worth noting, but beyond the scope of today, but really important, and which the lab leads you through, is the installation of the Datadog agent, which will ensure that whichever logs, metrics, and traces that you want to send will be sent and always and reliably sent. So you have to configure that as well. Yeah, so we've seen what streaming metrics looks like, and we know this is all configured properly. Let's see what we can do now in our next demo. So we've seen some basic reporting, and we're going to shift our attention now to becoming familiar with how to leverage and set up those useful dashboards, the things that aggregate it into one place. So we want to see dashboards and alerts, and how we can make sense of optimizing our app's performance. So here we go. Let's go ahead and do that. I am going to hop over to APM. Yeah, so we've seen some metrics. That's the dashboard. We'll get there in 1 second. I'm just going to hop over to APM here. Okay, so APM, we've got it set up, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and look for, it's right here. So like AWS Lambda, right? So if we want to see what's going on with our Lambda functions in greater granularity and detail, we can take a look at that here, our error count, and get a general summary, and dive in deeper as well, per what's being called, what resources are being fetched, what services are being started, all those kind of things. So this is a great place to maybe just particularly look at the Lambdas that we're using, and get some deeper insights into that on the APM side. So that's exciting. That's kind of how we're starting to make deeper sense of our metrics. We have logs as well, like we said, logs, metrics, and traces, right? So we know that our logs are streaming in from all these different sources, and that we can correlate them with other tools to be able to make sense of aggregate values, and especially tying things together for an end-to-end view, which is extremely, extremely important. When you have your backend traces correlated with your front-end monitoring, you can, and you have those logs sitting there, you can start to navigate towards seeing a particular problem, even down to a line of code, which is great. So we have our logs streaming in, and that is great. And now, as I mentioned, we are going to go over and look at real user monitoring for a moment. Let's go ahead and hop over here. Okay, so these are all the different sessions that are running now. You can see that we have different types. Synthetics is a different tool that tests out, synthetically tests out user sessions across every region, so that you can make sure things are generally okay in those regions. But here we have real users as well. And so look here, here was their their page load, when they try to load the page here, what was going on. And we can see that we have largest content. These are things that are very important to the front end monitoring, like in that initial load, and we can see that we have a bunch of different resources being fetched, and looks like this took 3 seconds because this chair image is huge. So that's not good. That might be something we want to dive in and fix. Anyways, what's important here in the correlation of logs, metrics, and traces is if I have like say a fetch request for a service, this is getting a resource, so it's very immediately obvious as to what we can do. But if I have, fetching, or if I have, like a request fetching a service or something like that, and there's an obvious delay, we can start to dive down deeper and correlate what happened to logs and traces. So that's usually set up in the instantiation of RUM in your app. But anyways, you can get that end-to-end view, and that's very, very helpful. So now it looks like, so I haven't correlated the logs and traces to RUM, but that would be my next step. So I can be alerted down to a line of code if front-end issues are occurring like that. So that's good to note. But let's see how this all comes together now in dashboards. So dashboards are probably one of the most important parts of centralization of your logs, metrics, and traces into one place. It's where you can bring it all together and start to make sense. Now, this is a particular dashboard that was created as an overview, of our AWS infrastructure resources for this particular application. But as you can see, with my EC2 instances, this is how many I'm running, which ones failed. How just general performance metrics, CPU utilization, all this kind of stuff. And then I can start to see deeper insights based on what I care about within the context of what's happening. The cool thing is here that if you care about a particular metric, oftentimes you can, you can go directly from that particular metric to setting up a monitor. So let's say I really care about CPU utilization, or really care about how many failed, especially, right? So I might go and I might want to create a monitor that says, hey, if this ever happens, the people who are responsible, the stakeholders for this particular part of the infrastructure, are going to need to know about it. They're going to need to figure out why and prevent that from happening. So you can immediately go into creating a monitor for that sort of thing, which is what we're going to do in just a moment. So this is all great, but I don't really want to have to manually look for issues. I just want to be alerted to them when they occur and have some automation set up so that unless there's something I explicitly need to do manually, remediation of that type will just be handled for me. Sometimes remediation has to happen manually, but a lot of times with redundant stuff, it doesn't. So as I just mentioned, you can create a monitor. We're going to go ahead and look at one that I already set up for this particular webinar so that we can save some time. So here is a monitor that I've set up. So like when you're building it, it looks more like this kind of view, and you can set a duration of time you want to look at, the kind of metrics that you want to track, and set alert conditions that trigger above the thresholds that you care about, and then notify the correct people based on if this alert is triggering or not. Right now I have this set to myself, and you may be in a situation like this. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that get pinged in the middle of the night when something goes down, which is not handy for them. So this can definitely help people resolve that issue. I set up this alert monitor for myself just a little bit ago, so I can actually looking through it's currently emailing me like a million alerts. So I'm gonna have to set that off or turn that off soon so I don't get overwhelmed with that. But I can imagine what it would be like to get pinged in the middle of the night like that, and that would not be very fun. So anyways, I set up this monitor, and right now that's the case. But let's go ahead and set ourselves up for something better. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to move on to the next portion here. So, whoops, that's not good. Don't need to do that. Okay, here we go. So we've seen that how we can set up ourselves for monitoring some crucial aspects of our AWS deployments, but we can now move into setting up automated workflows. That's how we're going to handle a lot of these these redundant tasks and not have to worry about it. We're going to set up some automated workflows for ourselves that handle some of the common and redundant tasks that repeatedly occur during our app's development lifecycle. So our learning objectives here will be to set up a workflow on this demo app that automates some important tasks for us, such as performing mitigation action when a deployment process fails. In our case today, we'll be kicking off a service to reboot and remediate an issue, but that action could be just as easily a deployment rollback, for example. We'll also be setting up an incident management resolution, and the first of those two items will occur based on how we set up this alert that triggers this mitigation process. And reporting that information to people on Slack. So let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, we're going to dive in to workflow automation. So here is workflow automation landing. Let's move in. These are some published workflows, but first thing we're going to do is take a look at these blueprints. These can help you get an idea of how this works. I might filter this list down to only AWS so I can see some of the different workflows that are available to us on AWS. These workflows are already set up to make your life easier for automating tasks that you don't want to have to do manually, like code deployments, creating and detecting IAM users, or deleting them, or adding them to groups, detaching EC2 instances from an auto-scaling group and so forth. But let's take a look at one here briefly. So let's see, I want to look at perform deployments with AWS. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and just type it in here. Perform deployments with, so like here's a general blueprint for this particular automation. So it's like a directed graph, no surprise there. We have a trigger. This one particularly is manual, and it kicks off a series of functions and messages that determine how this workflow is to proceed. And in this case, there's a manual approval, and that process determines if a code deployment is going to happen or not, which ends with a success or failure message that returned to the person who is making the decision. At this point, rather than jumping into the details of how to point each section of this particular workflow, to look into how that's configured, let's create our own from scratch and get a better look at how this can help us automate redundant and time-consuming tasks. So let's create a workflow that performs. We're going to do a workflow that performs a service restart if a problem is automatically detected and reported in order to auto-remediate an issue during deployment. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back into the landing here. Let's go over here. So this would be your landing for workflow automation. I'm going to go ahead and create a new workflow. First things first, every workflow starts with a trigger, and it relies on that. So that can be manual or automated, and what we're going to do today is rely on, we have to rely on this, but we're going to create one today, and we're going to do a monitor. So we're going to use that alert monitor that I've already set up and correlate it with this so that it triggers this particular workflow. So as we can see here, it is. This is essentially a monitor that tracks, well, you wouldn't know that. Yep, this tracks the error rates within a particular service and sets off an alert when a resource within the service is producing high error rates. And really, the only action it takes is to send an alert message to anyone that's subscribed to this predefined group here. You can set often the best thing to do here, which we'll do in a minute, is set it up to alert people who are or alert this workflow, but right now it's alerting me as I showed you. But this could be triggered at any time, and as we've seen, we don't want that one person to be responsible for a remediation task, especially if they're, say, sleeping. And so let's jump back over to the new workflow that we're building and get that going. So before I do that, we do have some AI functionality where you can tell Datadog what you'd like to automate. If it generates a workflow, it will generate a workflow based on what you've described, and that's going to be pretty cool. It's in private beta at the moment, but if you're interested in testing this functionality out, please reach out to us afterwards. We're not going to use it today because we're going to create this from the ground up ourselves. So let's go ahead and add a trigger. First thing we want to do here is add a trigger source to this monitor, which answers the question, when do I want this workflow to run? And we don't want it to run on a schedule or anything like that, but we do want it to run based on a trigger from a monitor. So let's go ahead and do that. Now you can change the handle for the monitor, which will be important. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Call it AWS partner demo. So I have a new workflow handle there. Can also change the name up here if I want. So AWS partner demo, which is great. So we changed the name of the workflow. We got our handle here, which is going to be extremely important to correlate that monitor to this. So by default, I have a lot of information already available to reference to me from a particular monitor. So like this is just out of the box, but I may want to, let's see. So I may want to have more information than, just what is out of the box coming from the monitor here to be available for this workflow. So I'm going to add something as well here. So I'm going to add an input parameter, which is going to help us get that additional context in here. So yeah, so let's go ahead and do that. Going to add an input parameter. Let's go add the plus button here. Going to give it a parameter name. So let's see, service name should probably be what I name this as well. And every time that this particular workflow is run, it's going to have this required service name input. So we've got that set up. The service name is going to be important, and we will define that as well. So I can say here that every time this workflow is run, I want to receive a service name. Even if someone runs it manually, they'll need to input the service in order for this to run. So that is required. So let's, this is a required parameter. Now let's, after we have that set up, the first thing we want to do next is to send a message over to Slack, right? Which is great. So I can open up the actions list here and hit send message over to Slack. You know what? We're getting up against the wall here with time. So I'm going to try to hurry this as much as possible. Yeah. So we can send a message to Slack, and then we can input. Yeah, so we have about 2 minutes left here on the time. So I think maybe the best thing to do is to go ahead and show you, show you a monitor that is set up to do this. What I was going to do is to, send a message, have the people be alerted who care about this, and then go down this workflow such that there's a happy path and a negative path. And the negative path is that it kicks off I'm just going to show you based on a blueprint here. It kicks off. So let's go ahead. That's the wrong one. Let's go ahead and go over here. It kicks off. Let's see, maybe I can just say collaboration DevOps. That's probably good. Yeah. So with this, that I kind of gave you I gave you an impression of what it would be like to set this up. But the next thing would be to kick off, actions in context of this. Like I was going to kick off the action to restart a service, and then when that service is restarted, it checks, for the health based on the metric that I defined. And when I add the name of this particular trigger here, instead of emailing me, it would have triggered that as well. So as you can see, you can set up these workflows for yourself, and they can be as complex or as simple as you need. The end result was going to be, if there was a negative result in that, it would trigger a PagerDuty action. So like, send a message over to PagerDuty as well as Slack. But I hope in general you were able to see how this works, and how you can set that up for yourself. So my apologies for running over on that. I am going to land the plane here, though. So today we learned what observability is, why it's a crucial aspect of the modern development workflow, and we learned how to centralize our observability solution such that we can get the most out of the telemetry data that we're generating. And finally, I wasn't able to get through the whole thing, but I was able to show you how we can set up monitoring for AWS deployments, as well as automated workflows that take care of any of the major performance or UX health issues that might occur or come up. And if you feel that you've only hit the tip of the iceberg in your journey towards leveraging a great observability solution, we have some more resources available for you right now. Please feel free to use any one of these resources, and as well as reach out to any of us anytime. We ran out of time for Q&A, but thanks a million for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Also, if you have any further questions about this, please feel free to reach out to Justin and I directly via our emails here, or ping me on any social channel. I'm open source pretty much everywhere across the web. So thanks again for having us, and we're grateful you could make it, and we will see you next time.
All right. Well, Ben and Justin, thank you both so much for joining us today. I feel like you squeezed the 90-minute workshop into 60 minutes, so incredible work. And we might have to have you come back here soon so we can run through that last bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, I would like to thank Ben and Justin one more time, and then just a couple of final reminders for our audience. Our session today was recorded, and we will be sending it to you via email here as soon as it becomes available. You can also find it living on the DevOps website. That's devops.com/webinars, and be sure to look in the on-demand section. I'll be contacting 2 of our most engaged attendees today to distribute $50 Amazon gift cards. So thank you so much for your chats, for your comments, your questions. And of course, pinned to the top of the chat, there is the post-webinar survey. We would love to hear your feedback about today's program. So I'd like to thank Datadog for sponsoring our program, and to everyone here, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you spending your time with us here at Techstrong Learning, and we hope to see you at a future Techstrong Learning experience. Have a great rest of your day, and you may now disconnect. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See ya.
Bye.